Robert Whittaker, you heard the comparison, or at least I did. If you follow MMA media pretty closely, you probably heard this as well. Last week there was the comparison that Whittaker's coach threw out there that he thinks Whittaker is like the new version of George St. Pierre. And when I heard that, I thought that was maybe a little bit of coach inflating his guy type of talk. Maybe it was a little bit of hyperbole. I didn't think it was necessarily accurate because I probably consider George St. Pierre to be the GOAT of MMA. So anytime you hear somebody compare somebody to George, I'm always a little skeptical, right away. Get the skeptical hippo eyes and, But then I looked into Whittaker's resume and I started hearing, people like Luke Thomas talk about his wrestling credentials from the last couple of years. And you look into it and you realize, like, damn, Whittaker's last three opponents have been Jacare, Romero, and in the last 4 years, Robert Whittaker has really developed his wrestling, like to the point where he was actually able to represent Australia in the Commonwealth Games in 2018 for his weight class in wrestling. He ultimately couldn't compete because the UFC wouldn't allow him to because they wanted him to defend the belt. But he never wrestled his entire life, similar to George St. Pierre. He didn't wrestle growing up. And then he was able to develop his wrestling to a level where he could compete in international competition. Like George St. Pierre didn't wrestle his whole life growing up. He was a traditional martial artist, and then he somehow developed his wrestling into being able to take down guys like Josh Koscheck, who are, Div 1 superstars in wrestling. And you look at Whittaker with, the fact that he was able to represent Australia in the Commonwealth Games, and he only began freestyle wrestling really in 2015 as like a side hobby while he was doing his MMA training. Obviously, that cross training is obviously there's a lot of benefit to that cross training. The wrestling practice he can apply in MMA. But the interesting point is that he has all of this wrestling experience now and has developed his wrestling game in such a way, but we still only think about Robert Whittaker as a striker. And his last three opponents, once again, were Jacare, Romero. That's dating back to the last 2.5 years. Those are the only three people that he's fought. And his wrestling has come so far, in the last few years, that, you have to think that he wouldn't have been able to use his wrestling on Jacare, really, because obviously Jacare is a world-class jiu-jitsu guy, one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the sport. So Whittaker had an immense advantage there, so on the feet, so he just kept the fight on the feet. And then against Romero, Romero's a silver medalist in the Olympics for wrestling, so it makes sense that Whittaker wasn't really using his wrestling too offensively there. Although his takedown defense against Romero in those 10 rounds against him, when Romero is an Olympic silver medalist, I mean, that kind of shows you a little bit about how good Whittaker's wrestling game is now. So that's a super interesting X factor in wrinkle in Robert Whittaker's game, is just the fact that he has high-level wrestling. That's 100% for sure. Just to be able to get the opportunity to represent Australia in the Commonwealth Games proves that. But he just hasn't had the opponent to show it against. And Israel Adesanya, being a true specialist in mixed martial arts, true kickboxing specialist in the sport of mixed martial arts, who better to try to use your wrestling against? This is a perfect opportunity for Whittaker to pull out a bunch of new tricks, show a whole new side of his game that he's highly developed that he hasn't shown yet in the UFC. And then you combine that with Whittaker's just his ability to throw really hard power shots. He can blitz in, cut an angle, and hit you with a big power shot. And you have to think, Whittaker proved through 10 rounds with Yoel Romero that he has cardio, he's got heart, he's got a chin, unquestionably, that are just pure granite. You can't question any of those aspects of his game. So he's going to have I would say he's got, a chin advantage over Adesanya, and I think that they're both going to have great cardio, but he's definitely got the knockout power advantage over Adesanya. So it makes me wonder, with Kelvin Gastelum being able to hit Adesanya cleanly in the first round and the fourth round, had him rocked in both of those rounds, what if Whittaker gets him rocked? I think Whittaker's top control and ability to bear over his opponents when he's throwing his ground and pound is, better than Gastelum's. His finishing instincts are better than Gastelum's. I would say his power is better than Gastelum's. His chin is going to be just as good as Gastelum's. So I just think that the wrestling game is an intriguing X factor for Whittaker, and just the fact that it's a 25-minute fight. Adesanya, in his UFC career, 2 out of 6 of his wins, only 2 out of his 6 wins, I should say, are by TKO. The other 4 are all by decision. So he's going to have the 25 minutes, in my estimation, to land his big shot. Whittaker is. So that's the really intriguing part of this matchup on the feet. Adesanya is going to be a little more clever. He's going to be able to, he should have an advantage sort of throughout the game on the feet. But Whittaker is going to have a full 25 minutes to land his big shot, which Gastelum was able to do 2 times. If he can land a big shot once, twice, 3 times, is he going to be able to spring on the opportunity and get the finish that Gastelum couldn't? That's going to be intriguing. The wrestling aspect is going to be intriguing to see if he busts that out. So that's what I think about the side of the fight from Robert Whittaker's perspective. Now let's look at Israel Adesanya's perspective. So the great thing about Israel Adesanya is that he doesn't just have the it factor outside the cage. He also has the it factor in spades inside the cage. And that's what really makes him super exciting. He fights out there like he's in the Matrix or in an anime or something. It's so cool to watch. And he can throw literally any strike. He can throw low kicks, mid kicks, head kicks from either leg at any time. And he's just so good at consistently feinting with them, just showing you the different possibilities of techniques that he could throw at you. Like, when you're his opponent and you go in there to fight him, that every single technique is basically on the table in terms of what he can throw at you. So your mind is already going in there with just such a high number of possibilities that you have to be considering. And then he just relentlessly throws feints. Like, they talk about excessively how the key to his game is his feints. And if you go back and watch his fight against Gastelum, which was earlier this year, fight of the year 2019, in terms of entertaining fight after the fact, like award season type of time. I mean, this is the fight of the year, speculative, like stakes wise. Anyways, I digress. It was, if you watch just the sheer amount of feints that he throws, it just freezes his opponent so much. And then the other really brilliant thing that he does is he doesn't just he'll feint and make you defend something so something else is open, right? But he'll also do techniques where he steps in to throw let's say a right hand over the top, and he'll step in to do that, and you'll go to defend it, and then he just doesn't throw it right away. He waits a half a beat, so you think, oh no, that was another feint, and you go to defend something else, and then on that half beat, as soon as you start dropping your defense away from where you just positioned it, then he hits you. So his feint game works not only just feinting a certain thing to make you defend somewhere so he can attack somewhere else, but also for when he enters on a certain angle, he'll show you an attack and then make you consider that, oh no, that attack's a feint, by waiting just a half a beat, and then he'll hit you with that attack that you first suspected. So he's just brilliant in his ways of finding open strikes, and his distance management, and his anti-wrestling has really come a long way. If you just watch his first fight in the UFC, he was fighting not a very high level fighter, and he was doing very well in stopping the takedown, but you could see between then and where he was at when he just fought Gastelum. I mean, his takedown defense is very high level. So even if Robert Whittaker does try to use his takedowns offensively a lot, that's not like, well, Adesanya is not going to have any answer for that at all. He's going to have like some answers. He's very good with his takedown defense against the cage and things like that. But, that's just an interesting part of the game that the grappling obviously massively favors Whittaker. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out if it does go to a grappling scenario at all. So ultimately, in this one, I think I'm leaning Whittaker in my head just a little bit. I think that, as I said, Adesanya has been knocked out in kickboxing before. Even though he's 17-0 in MMA, he has been knocked out before. Gastelum did rock him a couple of times in the previous fight. And Adesanya doesn't necessarily finish fights. He does win in dominant fashion, even if it does go to decision generally. Obviously, the Gastelum fight was a little back and forth. But with his propensity to going the distance, and then you're just giving Robert Whittaker 25 minutes of opportunity, and all he really has to do. I just don't know if Adesanya's chin, like how truly good it is. Like if Whittaker can just clip him really, really good one time in a 25 minutes worth of opportunity, because Adesanya loves to strike. So in Adesanya's world, you've got 25 minutes of opportunity to land your one big strike and just do enough defensively to not get TKO'd by him. So ultimately, I am leaning Whittaker a little bit, but the thing that makes me super hesitant is just the X factor, the it factor, I should say, with Adesanya. He just seems like he's got destiny behind him. Like fate is on his side. And if you've been watching his rise the whole time and you've been watching his interviews and performance after performance, you can feel this too. You can't really like describe it or articulate it, but he just feels like there's something special there, and like he knows about it kind of, and we don't. It's hard to describe, but he just feels like he has fate on his side. The destiny feels strong with this one. And Whittaker is coming off the long layoff. If Adesanya goes out there and embarrasses him, you could attribute it to that and his it factor coming together at the same moment. So that's the thing with Adesanya is it's not his skills. I mean, his skills obviously could win him the fight. I'm not saying that, but it's his it factor behind him. It just feels like the stars are aligning for this guy, and this is his destiny to become this champion and to, be this entertaining beacon inside the sport of mixed martial arts that, has unlimited potential. Because as I was saying earlier, until he loses, his potential is just unfathomably unlimited until you can see him lose, which is why he's the most exciting guy to watch in the sport right now and why this is going to be the fight of the year 2019.